Currently, from an AI deployment perspective, I think the numbers are somewhere around 70% failure rate for deploying AI solutions and monetizing them properly. There is not a bubble that's associated with AI itself. There is bubble associated with the underlying infrastructure, the data center, the energy, the hardware. That will change over time, but the usage of artificial intelligence, I think, is only going to grow and grow and grow. Data-driven businesses have shown that they are the only businesses that survive and grow properly. There is just way too much competition and edge for companies that have a proper data strategy to compete and eliminate their partners that do not adhere to the same. We'll build a single pane of glass where end users can go in and say, hey, I want to use this model, connect that through an API to their data storage, take a look at their data catalog and figure out this is what I have to work with. Storage is taken care of, performance is taken care of. It's just a click and serve from a model perspective. Before any pen is put to paper, any hardware is purchased, or even decided that AI is the way to go, there needs to be a very deep discussion around identifying what solution we want to provide, identifying the current cost of not having that solution, what we would gain by implementing a solution, and then obviously what we expect from that solution.
Is a vertical data and GPU financing empower enterprises and startups to accelerate AI adoption through high performance infrastructure co-location and flexible financing solutions. Hamid Djam is a CTO of vertical data and GPU financing, where he drives innovation in AI infrastructure through co-location and flexible financing solutions. With deep expertise in high performance computing and data center strategy, he helps organizations accelerate AI adoption while optimizing costs.
You also bring others onto your show that have a different view and a proven past and an experience track that is super useful. In a year from now, you won't only have one or two vendors out there with GPUs. There's going to be vendors out there that can...
All right, everybody, welcome to the AI Space Podcast. AI isn't just the future. It's a force rewriting the rules of business, wealth creation, and society. If you're a founder, innovator, or technologist, this is an AI show for you. The question you have to ask yourself is, will I blaze a path, follow the crowd, or be left in the dust? This is season 2, the 13th episode, and we're thrilled to have Hamid Djam, CTO of Vertical Data. I'm Sanjay Kalluvilayil, creator and host of the AI Space Podcast, founder and CEO of Stonehouse Advisors, your trusted advisor for AI founders and businesses focused on go-to-market strategy and execution. Hamid, on the AI Space Podcast, we jump right in to highlight game-changing insights that help founders and innovators drive innovation and scale their business initiatives. First of all, welcome. But what do you see as the key trends in AI going forward from 2026, short-term, medium-term, long-term?
Thanks for having me, Sanjay. Great to be here. Yeah, so there's this next year, next couple of years are actually going to be fairly crucial in the evolution of AI, as a part of our lives and the economy. So short, medium, long term. I think in the short term, basically there is some instability around hardware pricing, around inavailability of the overall availability of the hardware. How to get our hands on it, deciding which one is best, which way to go. In the mid to long term, I think the midterm kind of is hinging heavily on the short term, whether or not companies that are blazing trails and getting started as a startup have access to the required infrastructure to get their solutions built and deployed. But in the long term, I think when looking at the overall market from an investment perspective, when you look at, the NVIDIAs of the world, the Groks, the OpenAIs, the Facebook, the Google, there's a lot of investment being made behind the scenes into hardware companies that are developing AI training solutions that are not your traditional GPUs, right? These are built to purpose components to accelerate AI workloads, whether it's training, frontier models, or whether it's fine tuning, or whether it's low power consumption inference type of hardware. So that landscape is definitely at an inflection point that's going to change. With it lowering the cost of entry, lowering the requirements and reliance on the energy itself. So I think those types of things are going to dictate kind of where the market goes in terms of growth, in terms of who gets to grow, who gets to build new applications. And on top of that, the whole idea around cloud presence versus on-prem, which has been an ongoing discussion for a long time. But I think once these things kind of play out and establish themselves as kind of a standard, in terms of hardware availability, pricing, energy, and all of those, that will have an immediate impact in terms of how entities will deploy their solutions.
Okay, great. No, we'll definitely dive deeper in those insights. Hamid, so if you look back upon 2025, right? What is maybe the one most surprising insight, positive or negative, that kind of make you take a step back and go, oh, wow, I really need to rethink how I go into 2026? Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I'll do both for you, right? Just so we're not negative Nancy here. Yeah, let's start with positives, right? So in terms of a positive thing, I think the growth that AI as a solution and as a whole has shown has been tremendous. Having been in this industry for a very long time, I've been dealing with data analytics and now AI for almost 30 years. The level of growth that we've seen over the past 12 months is insane. What people have been doing with AI, improving it both from a performance perspective as well as accuracy and use cases has been tremendous. So I think that's a positive note for anyone in the business or trying to get into business or expand their existing business. So that's a positive. From a negative or less positive point of view, I think the insight that really surprised me was, we're all in this business of technology, and so we understand that not every single project always comes to fruition and is successfully deployed and monetized and used for what it was used was intended to be. However, currently, from an AI deployment perspective, I think the numbers are somewhere around 70% failure rate for deploying AI solutions and monetizing them properly, right? And I have my ideas around why that is, but yeah, that I think is a fairly large number and something that needs to be looked at and addressed.
Right. And then, no, I appreciate that. So what do you see as the key strategies for growing and scaling a business going forward? The top AI strategies?
From the perspective of an AI business or
any business, like if you want to, in 2026, how can a business leverage, what do you see from an AI perspective to grow and scale a business? We talk about trends, but if they really want to get some sort of ROI or yield or improvement in their business, what do you see as the key items?
I mean, look, I have to put my consultant hat on, right? And when you do that, all things kind of simplify a little bit, albeit at a high level. My perspective is, first, you have to understand your business, right? You have to know where you are with respect to a particular technology to be able to use it properly. So if you're a business that doesn't really that is not really a data-driven business, then number one, I would say that is a concern that needs to be addressed immediately, because data-driven businesses have shown that they are the only businesses that survive and grow properly. There is just way too much competition and edge for companies that have a proper data strategy to compete and eliminate their partners that do not adhere to the same. So with that, I would say once you understand where you are with respect to your access to data and how you utilize that data and information and monetize it, once you understand that, then whether you're at the beginning level, medium level, or an expert level makes a difference on how to utilize AI or any other technology for that matter to improve your business. If you're in the first or the second layer, then I would say the best thing to do is to identify bits and pieces of your business that I would consider low-hanging fruit, things that are repetitive, things that take cycles away from your experts to do what you pay them to do, and utilize AI technology to automate those things for them. Whether it's within your marketing, whether it's within your sales, whether it's within your forecasting, depending on what your business is, customer churn, those types of things are traditionally things that entities used to do with quote unquote your traditional, data warehouses and your data mining strategies and your Hadoop workloads and things like that. But using AI, you can be a lot more proactive and automate a lot of decision making that happens immediately, right? If you're at a higher level than that, what I would suggest is, I think the majority of that large number of failures in AI deployments actually play probably in that higher level. And the reason there is because they underestimate the cost. They underestimate the human resources required to implement, and they underestimate the longevity of a particular solution. So all of these things need to be taken into fact. And before any pen is put to paper, any hardware is purchased, or even decided that AI is the way to go, there needs to be a very deep discussion around identifying what solution we want to provide, identifying the current cost of not having that solution, what we would gain by implementing a solution, and then obviously what we expect from that solution, right? And put all of the costs and all of the requirements together, all the way from hardware procurement, maintenance, location, energy requirements, up to stack in terms of usability and all of those things, and then figure out what to do. So it's very important to understand the use case as it applies to your business, the cost of that, and then the return that you're expecting to get in a real way, not just daydreaming that I'll be able to monetize this thing. And so that is, to my in my opinion, extremely important, is understanding that picture.
I think that's very important, especially for the founders and the folks that are leading businesses. Obviously, you're a CTO, and you think people always lead with the technology part of it, but it's really, before you may have a tool belt, right? But before you decide it's a hammer or a screwdriver, you got to determine what's a problem that you're solving, or which side of the hammer you're going to use, right? Whether you're going to smash something or pry something open. So I think those are very important insights. So for our audience out there, I want everyone to welcome Hamid. A little bit about vertical data. It's a vertical data and GPU financing empower enterprises and startups to accelerate AI adoption through high performance infrastructure co-location and flexible financing solutions. Hamid Djam is a CTO of Vertical Data and GPU Financing, where he drives innovation in AI infrastructure through co-location and flexible financing solutions. With deep expertise in high-performance computing and data center strategy, he helps organizations accelerate AI adoption while optimizing costs. Hamid, a big welcome to the show. Could you tell the folks in the audience a little bit more about your background? What led you in this foray into AI?
Thanks again for the time and the opportunity. Yeah, I've been in this industry almost 30 years. By education, I'm a software engineer. Went to school in California, in Fullerton, actually. And kind of started my career writing code for a lot of different airline parts manufacturers. Did that for about a year, and very quickly got bored of that and kind of shifted my focus towards data. So at that time, a long time ago, obviously, the tools of the trade were basically data warehouses and data mining and that kind of thing. And it was more of a backwards looking way of utilizing data. So I did that for a little while, worked for a few startup companies that were doing distributed computing, trying to solve the performance issues that one faces or used to face when dealing with lots of data and crunching it. Did that. Both of those startups were successful. One was acquired by Microsoft. Another one was acquired by EMC. And I did a couple of stints at Teradata as well as Oracle. And my last opportunity came after the takeover of one of those startups by EMC, which was called Greenplum at the time. I was recruited by an old friend of mine that knew I used to work at Greenplum. I went over to EMC and helped them set up an analytics pre-sales division from an engineering perspective to help the EMC team and their sales teams be able to properly position that solution. Did that for about 6 or 7 years, and then the Dell acquisition came about, and right around that time is when I moved from the division where I was into another division, which within Dell is called the Unstructured Data Solutions. And their focus was all analytics and all data. Of course, at that time, we're talking about almost 10 years ago, that was all Hadoop based type of solutions and activities. I joined them as a CTO that was responsible for that across all industries, and did that up until 2.5 years ago. And at that time, I left Dell, and I kind of wanted to do something on my own. Met a few great people, one of whom was actually my neighbor. And they told me about vertical data and that they were starting the company. And I joined them at that point as a small partner and CTO of the business.
Okay, very cool. So, what about vertical data made you feel like, hey, this is something I should join, and that something that's good to build out, right?
Yeah, I think again, kind of, I don't want to keep repeating the same thing, but, the fact that a lot of these projects fail has to do with the nature of the beast. It's extremely complex to set up and deploy and maintain AI solutions. Now, whether it's for internal consumption or whether you're building an AI focused product to offer to the public, it's extremely complex to do that. It's complex from a development perspective, thought perspective, but it's also complex from a supply chain perspective. It's got a lot of moving parts, whether it's human or whether it's technology, and getting all these things often requires going to a lot of different resources to acquire them. And so obviously the more moving parts you have and the more resources you have to rely on, there is more chance for failure along the line. And failure translates at the end of the day to financial setback, which accumulated then can lead into failure of a project, right? So the thing that was good for me was, when in talking with vertical data in the beginning, we identified this, and this was something that we wanted to address, was to build a solid, as much as possible, soup to nuts supply chain in one place where entities can come in, understand by talking to us the entirety of the picture, the upfront cost of the solution, the type of hardware, the availability of the hardware. What are we looking at? What's the industry looking like? The requirements from a human resources perspective. How are we going to maintain these? What type of resources do we need? What type of skill sets do we have? All the way up, or the other way around, the design of the solution, whether or not you need the super expensive servers versus the smaller ones. Is this a model that you're going to train from scratch, or are you just focusing on inferencing? So a lot of these things, we bring in our own expertise, as well as partnering up with other companies that have been doing this separately. Bringing them under the same umbrella will help our customers get a good, warm feeling of where they are, where they want to be, and understand timelines, understand resource availabilities, and understand impact, right? And minimize risk as much as possible. Now, add to that the availability and the opportunity that we offer to a lot of our customers, which is basically offering them financing for procuring these hardware that they want to deploy, and that is by itself an extremely large investment. Our average deal size is roughly $125 million. Now, for larger companies, in some cases, it makes more sense to pay cash. It makes more sense to keep the cash, build the business, rather borrow, right? Use the money, the funds that you can borrow to build your solution, and use the existing funds that you have to make sure that your business can continue to grow and you have available funds to do other things. So it's kind of a CapEx versus OpEx type of thing, right? Helps those larger companies that way. And for the smaller startups that want to get in, sometimes without the availability of these types of investments, they just basically, the idea goes to the roadside because there is no funds to support it.
I think that's very important. We'll get into, especially on the funding side. Maybe just to I know you touched a lot of this, but maybe just concisely, you're as the CTO, right, Chief Technology Officer. What exactly is your role and mandate of, to go forward?
So what I focus on a daily basis is making sure that I get involved with our customers from the beginning. A lot of people have a great idea, but they're not 100% equipped in terms of human resources and things like that to figure out proper architecture for deployment, right? A proper architecture has to have at least two or three very important pillars built in, right? It has to be scalable. It has to make financial sense. It has to be enterprise ready. It has to be safe and secure, and other things, right? So what I do is I kind of act as an advisor, technical advisor, when the need it is there, right? So that's one of the things that I do is to make sure that we build a solution that is really a correct one for our end users. That's one. The other one is I basically have my hands on the pulse of the industry. I try to read up and be as up as I can on the technology as it's changing and shifting. We are building a few solutions that are not ready for me yet, I guess, to talk about in detail. We potentially do that as we get them released, probably in the next couple of months. But what it boils down to is I'm developing a platform that allows the GPU as a service market to kind of take the next leap. Right now, everybody is become like an Uber or a taxi, if you will, right? They have this hourly thing that they turn on, and the GPUs are the GPUs. You want a B300? Fine. Within a 10-cent delta, you can rent it from anybody under the sun, right? And you get the same thing, and that's about it. So a lot of these companies are kind of stuck with a way to grow. The competition there's a lot of them out there, right? So we're building a platform that's going to kind of solve that and bring a kind of a secret sauce type of thing that we would offer across the board to these types of businesses. Number one, it would help them be able to charge a premium so their business can grow and potentially disrupt that market, but also to the end users, right? They would have to, they will be able to get away with using less hardware and have to spend less money, but it's kind of a win-win type of thing. So that's another thing that I've been working on. And overall, so the technical strategy of the company, right? How to grow the business, looking at services is another very important thing. Up to now, we are basically partnering with MSPs that are out there providing that service to the end users. But for me, that's another thing that we'd like to do, either build it in-house or through acquisition, is bring the MSP under the umbrella of vertical data. So as much as we can build this supply chain solid in one place, that's kind of, from a technological perspective, that's kind of what I focus on.
Right. And for those in the audience that aren't familiar with MSPs, those are managed service providers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they partner with your company, engage with their client base. And they may do some business development. They may do some of the deployment, et cetera, right?
Yeah, basically the idea is we have a footprint of data centers all over the world, right? And that solves one problem. The other one is, where's your hardware? We provide that. That solves the second one, although not in that sequence, the other way around. However, then at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Hey, do I need to put an entire IT team in place to take care of this stuff? Or does it make sense for me to give you a bunch of SLAs and say, hey, I need this hardware to run at this rate, be available at this rate, and you go figure it out? And that's where an MSP comes in. They set it up, configure it based on your requirements, or if you don't have one, they'll design one for you based on your requirements. And they make sure that your SLAs, your service level agreements are met, your performance is met, your business is run, and they can be whatever business they are as opposed to an IT business. And we do that for them.
Yeah, no, thanks for explaining that, because we have a lot of new founders, people getting into this, and maybe not understand some of these concepts.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So thanks for that. In terms of I think your ideal customer profile or some of the target segments and use cases, can you elaborate on that?
That's not an easy question to answer, unfortunately, because We have customers from all walks of life. We have startup companies that are building products. Lately, we've been getting a lot of neoclouds that are coming to us, looking for hardware, looking for data center, basically energy, right? Space to put them. Because the obviously, and I'm not, I don't want to be Captain Obvious here, but the way you make money from AI is not to train models and then, put them on the shelf. The way to make money from AI is to inference. That's where you monetize it. It's being used, and inferencing requires availability and low latency. So that has kind of changed the way data center business is working. Right, you have to kind of focus on smaller data centers that are spread and connected globally, so that you can service your customer base. For customers that are for companies that have built AI solutions globally, they have to have these things available with low latency everywhere. Let's say you're a company that wants to service the northeast part of the United States. You have to have presence in that area, but you're not going to need, gigawatts of power, right? Maybe maximum you have, a megawatt of power requirement, or even less than that, depending on the type of hardware that you're using. So, yeah.
No, that's important. And then, the fact that you said as a CTO, you're kind of an advisor. A lot of people think, okay, I'm going to go buy a house. If you're buying a cookie cutter house, that's no big deal, right? But in your case, a lot of folks, they don't, especially if it's the more complex a project, you're kind of like the custom builder. So you're putting forth the blueprint, laying the foundation. How do you stack everything up? That kind of leads us into my next question. It's really around what tools and frameworks are essential for building a solid AI, ML architecture and tech stack. So from a methodologies, frameworks, architecture, platforms, tools, I'm using kind of like the house analogy, right? How do we stack it up? So how do you approach that for anybody that's, whether it's your business or going forward to build it out? What are your insights around that?
Yeah, I mean, the number one question, or the first question I ask people is a very simple one, right? But it's one that takes maybe sometimes days or weeks to answer. And it's, what are you trying to do? What's the use case, right? I think if you don't get that, and to a lot of people, this might be very obvious, but you'd be surprised as to how many people I talk to, and they can't give me a straight answer about this, right?
Yeah,
So
they can tell you they have a hammer. They can't tell you what they're trying to do with the hammer, right?
yeah, I mean, they may have an ultimate solution in mind, but they haven't worked out the details of how this thing will be used. How many users are you going to have? Where are they going to be? What's your security requirements?
What's the problem you're solving for that customer, right?
Exactly. What industries are you going to work with? There's different requirements. So once you understand all of that, then it kind of makes the choice in terms of software and hardware extremely easy. Because, and that's the beauty of technology, is that there's more ways to skin a cat than I can count, right? The most important thing is identifying what it is you're trying to do. Identify a problem statement, identify a solution statement. Once you have that, then building the hardware is super easy. And I'm lucky because I don't claim to design all these things from the ground up. We work with a lot of partners and OEMs, like the larger companies that exist and sell the hardware and the software. I work with them to design these solutions, but it's extremely important to think about that complexity as well, right? You have to think about the networking that you're going to have in place. That networking needs to be able to support, that topology needs to support your future growth plans. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll do a leaf and spine with these many switches and these many layers, and that's it, right? That may work for today, but if in 6 months or a year you want to expand that footprint, that topology may not work, and you may need to rework it, add new switches, take things offline. And so all of these things are things that hamper business and growth. So scalability is important. Security is another thing. Are you going to have customers in Europe? Well, there is data requirements, data security requirements, a lot of different requirements.
The AI Act, EU AI Act, everything. Right?
Exactly. There's a ton of different requirements, and then once you drill even deeper, per industry, banking has different compliances, healthcare has different compliances, finance has different
geography, locality, like it could be a state or a province. What have you,
exactly. Yeah, and then super simple. Are you training data often? Are you fine tuning often? Does your data set change? Does it get stale very often? That changes the complexity of the game. That dictates what type of hardware you need to have, right? If you're just doing inferencing, then you may not need the fastest and the greatest GPUs that are currently available, right? That may be overkill. So you can always scale back to less expensive, more available hardware and deploy your solution that way. So it's very important to understand the workload, understand tokens per second, and go down even deeper than that and identify the cost of those types of things when it comes to AI. So those are discussions that need to be had and looked at. And quite frankly, a lot of people have give that a lot of thought before we speak with them, and there's a lot of people that only have a portion of that ready and need some help and guidance to get it across the line. But you'd also be surprised at how many people come to us and say, "Hey, I need 10, 100 or 10 or whatever, pick a number, B200s," and then that's it, and that just baffles me. It's what about how it's made up? You should care about the amount of memory it has. You should care about the networking. Do you want InfiniBand? Do you want whatever, right? All these things make a huge difference in how to size them, how to price them, availability, scalability, all these things.
Is some of that overkill for some of the stuff that they're trying to do from a cost and complexity perspective, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes a GPU is not the best thing for in a certain use case, right?
I agree. I mean, if the use case has to do with machine learning or neural networks, for that matter. So if it's really an AI workload, the discussion is not really if GPUs are the way to go. It is the way to go. But like I said, right, in a year from now, you won't only have one or two vendors out there with GPUs. There's going to be vendors out there that can support even existing models. Running on proprietary hardware that's been optimized just to do those tasks. Whereas your regular GPUs are regular GPUs. They're built to play games, at the same time do matrix multiplication, which lends itself to this whole AI
So
type of.
when does a GPU versus a TPU make sense?
Again, it all depends on cost at the end of the day, right? Are you doing inferencing? Are you doing training? Are you doing fine tuning as training? Are you building models from scratch? How many parameters your model has? All those things make a little bit of a difference. But if you see, I think the market is consolidating. Grok was just acquired. A lot of these companies, they have their own specific hardwares. The even the cloud providers have their own TPUs that they build. But I think the difference again boils down to what are you trying to do, and what is the most cost-effective, scalable enterprise solution that you can get your hands on today.
Right, and then as you work with clients, do you look at once they figure out the pain point? Do you look at their sources of data or data fidelity, or go through any process of that? Any assessment?
Well, that's so that I would say that from a consultancy perspective is question number two. So you have a problem statement, and you have identified how you want to solve that problem. Okay, fine. So now let's take a look and see what ammunition you have. And at that point, data is gold, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Good data in, good data out. So you have to understand your data portfolio. You have to understand and have a good data strategy. And by data strategy, I mean, how are you keeping your data? How much data are you keeping? How are you collecting your data? How much data are you collecting? How much data is just being purged? How important is that? And then the whole data engineering part of AI, which probably 70% of the time spent building AI projects, is the actual data engineering, data wrangling, is cleaning it up, understanding what part of that data to use. And then fine tuning, identifying parameters, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get too deep into that, but yeah, I think that is probably as important as the first question. So if you know what you're trying to do exactly, but you don't have the data to do it, you're lost. You still can't get going.
And then, like you said, between training and inference, right? I'll use kind of like the SAT prep example. So there's a training where you're taking the SAT prep and you're taking some practice tests, and but at some point you actually have to take a test and see if, okay, did your training, is it actually working? Because there's people that say, oh, I studied for the test, but I did horrible on the test. Well, because they probably just studied all the answer. They didn't probably understand the questions to be able to do an inference or predict the answers in a different context, right? And that's maybe some insights around that, the prediction portion. How's that animal different, especially from what you're providing in solutions for different customers?
So that question is more around the overall software design. Well, not software design. I would say the model design. And it's so like I said, right? The most important and time consuming part of developing an AI solution is the actual data piece, right? Cleaning it properly, making sure it's available, identifying the parts of that data that you need. And then, based on the problem you're solving, if you have a data scientist on board, he will know what you're trying to do, right? Is this a classification problem? Is this a whatever, right? So based on that, you have a choice of, strategies and, quote unquote models that you want to follow mathematically, and you do that, right? So it all boils down, the accuracy of your outcome depends on the amount of data and the quality of data that you feed that model. So assuming you've done all the math right, if you give it proper data and enough of it, then it's going to have a level of confidence at the end of the day that will dictate how accurate of an answer it will give you. Now, having said that, there are ways to make an AI application finite. In other words, deterministic. So for a long time, and still even in a lot of industries, the problem with adopting AI is the deterministic or undeterministic nature
That's
of a
very
lot of.
probabilistic. What people don't understand is LLMs just predicting the next sequence of words in the next word in a sentence, right? It's based on probability. The next word is going to be X, Y, Z. That's a 60% probability versus a different probability, and they're just predicting the next word in a sequence, right?
Correct. Yes. So that leads into this, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you ask the same question,
You'll get a different answer each time.
you may get different answers, right? And that is the undeterministic nature of not all models, but some, depending on how they were developed.
Yeah, coding is very deterministic.
Exactly. So what we are doing is in-house, as well as finding partners and partnering up with companies that are able to take existing models and certify them as deterministic. And that's extremely important. I mean, think about it, just super simple terms, self-driving cars. You don't want them to, given the same situation, make three different decisions, right? Because from an insurance perspective, from a safety perspective, you don't know what you can approve, right? If, for example, car is driving, there's a ball that comes across the road, a child is running from the right, and there's an elderly person walking from the left with a cane in their hand. What do? Do you run over the ball? Do you swerve to the right? Do you swerve to the left? Whatever that answer is, as long as it's the same one over and over, number one, if it's wrong, you can fix it. And if it's correct, you can guarantee that correct decision is going to be made all the time. So that I think is super important. And a lot of companies are investing in making their models deterministic and getting that certified that way.
Yeah, and then here's my question in what you provide too. So whether it's a machine learning tool, it's an LLM, an SLM, small language model, it could be an automation, AI agent, AI art creativity tool, maybe someone's generating that, or generating AI video. Let's go through the gamut, right? It could be physical AI, like you were talking about in terms of self-driving. It could be in manufacturing. So there's all those different cases in what you're providing. You have to approach all those differently, or can you approach? Is there like 60%, 80% same, or is it pure, like almost each one has to be customized? How do you approach that?
Well, it's a yes to both. So when you think of it, so if you look at it from a 10,000 foot perspective, all solutions for a business are essentially the same. You either have a product or a service. That product and a service has customers, and it requires service and lifecycle management, right? So whether you're a supermarket, a hospital, a car manufacturer, or any other entity, you're dealing with those things at a high level, right? And you're going to use some kind of software solution to fix that, whether it's AI or whatever. Make it. So from that perspective, they have similarities. Now, from a development perspective, the hardest part usually to get people up and running is this is something that you have to continuously do. You have to continuously look at your model, the performance, the accuracy as it's getting used. So it's very important, and also as newer models come out, right? You may have used a Quen model or a other type of open weight model to fine tune and built into your solution. And now all of a sudden something else is out that works faster, smaller memory footprint, and so on and so forth. So you want to use that, but that ability to be very nimble and quickly get to work requires a little bit of pre-work. So a lot of neo clouds, some of them have this, some of them don't. Again, the product that I was talking to you a bit earlier that would kind of bring everything together has that in as well, which will basically have a portal for developers to go in. All the models that are currently all over the place in Hugging Face or other places, other repositories, will be there for them. We'll containerize them to run on a Kubernetes platform. So basically, we'll build a single pane of glass where end users can go in and say, hey, I want to use this model, connect that through an API to their data storage. They can look at their data catalog and figure out this is what I have to work with. Storage is taken care of. Performance is taken care of. It's just a click and serve from a model perspective. So that right there takes days or weeks, sometimes months out of a project timeline. Makes it a lot easier for them to work with and utilize and share their work with their coworkers. So that's another thing that we are working on, but is something that kind of builds a standard for a company to be able to be nimble and agile. So that's also very important to kind of do that pre-work, so you don't have to repeat a lot of that thing, a lot of those steps over and over.
No, I appreciate that. So let's shift gears a little bit. So what about the AI space podcast resonated you? Hey, yeah, I'll be a guest on the show.
I'm an older guy, so the whole podcast thing didn't really catch on with me for a while. But that was my ignorance, just because I assumed knowledge is to be found in books and that's it, or from your buddy and show you something. But I think there is a lot of good people out there that either themselves or through working with others, just like you're doing, you have tons of knowledge yourself, but you also bring others onto your show that have a different view and a proven past and an experience track that is super useful. So you can read all the books you want, but as long as you're not getting a perspective of someone who has had direct experience or is currently in the middle of it, it kind of sheds the light to a different degree, right? So I'm now pretty much addicted to listening to podcasts and to reading blogs because it just helps, and not just in AI. For me, it's kind of a life thing. If I want to learn something, that's the first place that I go.
No, that's great. And, that's a whole backdrop. You said you're an older guy, right? So, I was 53. It's going to be 3 years ago. I turned 50 and I said, AI is coming down the pike. I got to figure this space out. So I dove into it, got some certifications, leveraging 30 years of real experience, right? Domain expertise. Started my AI consulting business a year ago. Someone reached out to me on a podcast. Says, hey, why don't I give back? I'm sure other people trying to figure out this AI space. Let me talk to the founders, technologists, innovators that are actually building in the space, because there's so much. There's too much out there, right? And how do you separate the signal from the noise? So how do we create real playbooks to actually grow and scale a business? And I think that's what people are looking for. So I appreciate people like you that are actually building the space to say, okay, this is what's real, this is what's not real, and this is how you kind of like I said, separate the signal from the noise. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I hope that this is useful for people out there. I know, like I said, just going online and getting information, whether it's a video blog or whether it's a podcast, is is something that I do almost every day. There's a ton of value. People have to be selective, obviously, because anyone can say anything. But that also goes with books. So I don't see any difference there in terms of, you just have to make sure you find quality. And I've always enjoyed listening to you and learning from people that come onto your show. There's always something to learn. There's always ways to improve ourselves. And I think this is a great, inexpensive way, but free, to get better at what you're doing, or get confirmation that that what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, I've already got some new concept here, refining some concepts already. Where's the best place for folks to, if they want to connect with you? Is it on LinkedIn? Your websites. What do you recommend for folks?
Yeah, so I'm definitely on LinkedIn. That's one way. Verticaldata.io is our website, and yeah, I'm always available to help, be an advisor. I don't charge anything. I love to talk technology. I'm a geek at heart, so I'm sure if I explain something to someone, I'll probably learn 10 things on top of that myself. So yeah, absolutely. And I really welcome any type of question, comment, or anything from anyone. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, before we continue, I want everyone to follow Hamid Djam. Definitely like, comment, subscribe to the AI Space podcast, because that helps us grow the show and have more innovative guests like Djam, Hamid Djam. So, and also, if you're stuck in your business, you can reach out to Hamid or myself. I have you can book a meeting with me for 15 minutes to help you get going in your business. So a lot of people focus on technology, etc. We try to be a little bit more holistic on this program. So what critical insights do you have around vision, mindset, strategy for long-term success?
I'm kind of still honing that skill, so to speak. I've always had this entrepreneurial, streak of looking and trying to find the next opportunity. But from what I have seen and experienced personally, I'm not saying by any means that this is how it works, but for me, the way it's worked is any one or any entity that has ever come up with a successful solution to a problem has firsthand had experience with that problem. So, and again, I don't want to state the obvious, but I would say trying to build a business first and thinking about what you're trying to do second is not the way to do it. I think when trying to do something from a business perspective, usually for me it comes in a way of I'm thinking, or sitting somewhere thinking, and I'm like, hey, I deal with this thing day in and day out. Let me go and see if there's any solution for this. I'll go, I check, there's nothing out there, or if there is, it's too expensive, or it just isn't 100% what I'm looking for. And I consult a lot. I think that's very important, to talk to a lot of people and try to gauge, okay, so for me, this problem exists and I can't find a solution, or a good enough one. Do you know of something, or are you experiencing the same thing? And I think once you do that, then you have a good identification, and already, because this is a problem you're facing, you are an SME, you are a subject matter expert, because you're dealing with that issue. So then building a solution to solve that problem becomes a lot easier. Not easy, but easier than otherwise. So I think that is probably key, is not to try to just say, oh, well, everybody is building chatbots, maybe I should go do the same. If you don't have experience, or if you don't know how they work, or the pitfalls or the success criteria, it is going to be a costly exercise. Not saying that it will fail. You might fail, but if you do something where you're trying to solve a problem that you have experience with, it's always a better risk worth taking.
I think that's a valuable insight. It's whether you have you're an SME in that. If you have the domain expertise, if you don't have the domain expertise, go find the people that do. And that's the next thing about it's one thing to have a dream, but you have to follow through with action. So what do you think from an action perspective is maybe one insight that you have? Because we can sit there and dream all day, but if you're not getting out of bed and actually doing it, you're not going to get to where you want to go, right?
Yeah, I think, look, it's super simple. Everybody has dreams and aspirations. And again, without getting too philosophical here, boxers have coaches, soccer teams have coaches, football teams have coaches. You have to have experts around you. And the best thing to do is to have as many as you can afford to have around you, right? So you know what you know, and you want to have a group of consultants around you. And I say consultants, but advisors, friends, partners in business, right? So that you can always make sure that the decision you've made is the best decision that you could have made on that day, time, and place when it was made. So I think that's the important thing. Sometimes you need people to set you straight. In life, I have my wife. Everything I say, she double checks me, triple checks me.
Oh
Most of
yeah, I
the
know about that. Well, no, it's actually what you said is very important because people don't realize as an executive or even an entrepreneur, startup founder, and I know this, it's a lonely experience, and a lot of people don't understand the things that you're struggling with, and sometimes you can't sleep at night because you're solving problems, etc. Right? And and you don't want to get into that, into that dark place when that's where people go crazy when you're by yourself. So you got to surround yourself with family, with friends, and also advisors, as you said, that can give you, real advice, but also bring light to your day sometimes too, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So
Hundred
I know this is not your domain per se, but you are a consultant, you advise. From a sales and marketing perspective, what insights can you share on, maybe getting your first clients, expanding your clientele, expanding that client base, right?
Yeah, I think that strategy is almost as important, if not sometimes more important than the product or service that you're trying to sell, right? You can have the best solution possible in the world, but if you can't market it properly and if you can't sell it properly, then you will almost certainly fail. And in the world, there's lots of examples of such things. I've seen a lot of companies in various different industries come up with excellent solutions, fantastic solutions, but their lack of ability to market and sell it properly has led to their demise. I mean, fantastic example. There was a company in California called Sun Microsystems, right? I probably don't have to get too deep into that, but that's a
It'll be
company
good
that,
for some of the audience who are maybe
yeah, I
not
mean, look,
familiar and
they did a lot. They built hardware, they servers, blah blah blah. They Java, right? That was developed by them to majority of the degree, right? But they failed to monetize all of it, and eventually, Sun Microsystems got acquired by Oracle years ago, and not even sure if that hardware is even getting used or built anymore. Java is now being monetized to a degree, but not as much as it could have been if it was marketed and sold properly. So yeah, I mean that's one example, and I don't want to pick on that particular company, but that just goes to tell you, right, that's one end. And then I also know a lot of companies that have terrible technology, but they market the heck out of it, and they can sell, and those products are selling, right? I don't want to give an example there because I don't want to get heat there.
there's also the software that I use that's probably been around for 30 years, but it's not necessarily the best, but it gets the job done, right? And then, like you said, I mean, I've learned one thing: sales and marketing is a long pole in the tent. Because if you're not getting sales, you're burning either your cash or somebody else's cash, and you're not going to make payroll. You're not going to be able to. I mean, I even deal with this, when I started my podcast too, and we can have this amazing conversation, right? But if I'm not doing my part on the sales and marketing and the social media, SEO, GEO, AEO, whatever you're doing, right? No one will see this podcast. And because if someone types the AI podcast, you're probably going to see 5 videos from Diary of CEO or some other, then actual some other AI podcast. And then how does my podcast come out? And you go and so you have to break through, and hopefully there's good quality, there's other things, but even if you have the best quality, you have to figure out that sales and marketing aspect and know how to play the game, right? And the game is changing, especially with this whole, we're moving from SEO, search engine optimization, to some people call it GEO, generative engine, or now they're calling it AEO, which is more the AI engine optimization, right? Have you guys started getting into any of that?
Personally, I would say I don't really occupy myself too much at that level. We have partners that help, but I certainly work with them, and I encourage everyone to actually do the same, to basically let them know what the vision is, what we're trying to do, and what we mean to do. And then we use them as a sounding board, number one, to say, hey, you know what, for your industry, the first two things that you're trying to do are good, but you know what, nobody is doing this, and it's because it doesn't work. So that helps. Again, it's all about consulting, but yeah, no, me personally within the company, that's not my role. So I usually work within a framework of laying things out, where I can then hand it over to experts, or marketing experts and sales experts that can do that. Now, within sales, I do get involved, because selling AI technology is different than any other technology sales that I have ever been a part of. And for 30 years, I've strictly worked for this side of the world, which is I was always a seller. I was never a consumer of any technology, right? So I've seen success, I've seen failure, and the best thing you can do is have a very technically trained sales team, so that they can, if your because you have customers that are extremely technical, and they will take you down a rabbit hole asking very, very technical questions. And if you can't answer those questions, then they immediately eliminate you as a purveyor of a technology stack, because in their eyes you don't know anything, right? You have to at least know as much as your users, and that's where I see kind of where I come in, is to make sure that my team knows what's going on technology wise. And that's one side. And the other side is having a capable team that can get you in front of the customer, because that is the secret sauce, is being able to open the door and get you in, so you can tell your story on how different than anybody else. But yeah, that's very important. And then obviously, as you do that, the branding is extremely important. Once you establish yourself as a brand, and this goes for personal aspects as well, right? People on LinkedIn or other places, or yourself with the show, you have to establish your show as a brand. People identify you as an expert in X, Y, or Z. So when they're thinking about something that it falls within your domain, then immediately there's, oh, okay, so we have Sanjay, we have Mr. X and Mr. Y. So we're just automatically narrowing down and not even looking at anybody else. So that's very important, is establishing your brand and your presence and your worth. And that's just basically through making publications, being in the public eye, and social media is great for that. And by doing that, people will see what value you bring to the table.
Yeah, it's all about bringing value. And then, insights around streamlining operations and scaling a business. Before you answer that, I think this really goes into it, because you talk about financing, right? And, because at the end of the day, there's a business case and there's opportunity cost, right? And what you're providing is, okay, instead of me laying down, I'll just make, $1 million or whatever up front, I can now, through financing, make payments over time, and then use that money to go invest and grow my business, right? And that's basically what you're providing. But how does that work? And maybe articulate that for the people that are trying to understand that, in a simple way that's meaningful to them, that could be meaningful to them, right? Well, maybe a potential client out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, it's simple. I mean, when you're starting a business, if you look at it from that perspective first, you either have raised funds, or you're in the process of raising funds, and that can be successful or not. So based on that, you either start or give up, I guess, right? But there is another way of doing this, and this is specifically for AI based businesses. I've never gotten really involved or been interested in looking at financing for other IT solutions, but AI is kind of a up and coming, or AI financing, I should say, is kind of an up and coming thing. We actually run and operate GPUfinancing.com as part of Vertical Data. So just a plug there. But what this does is it allows you to do exactly what you said. If you have cash, keep it, grow your business at the same time, pay over time. But it requires you to have a sound business plan. The banks and investors out there that finance these types of deals, they usually either look at how much money you have in the bank, who you're, who's basically putting the money in the bank, and your business model is extremely important and what you're trying to finance, right? So all this hardware and GPUs, if you look at the market, their value is fluctuated quite a bit, jumped up high, gone down, jumped up high again. Overall, though, it's a very strong market with predictions of growth for the foreseeable future. So the banks don't really see that as too much of an issue to finance, because if you at the end of the day can't pay, they can take the hardware and do something with it and recoup the money. But you have to have some collateral, whether it's money you can put down to reduce the risk, or on the other side, sometimes we work with businesses that have customers waiting. So let's take a NeoCloud, for example, right? They have customers that want to sign 2 to 3 year contracts for, let's say, H200s or B200s or whatever, right? And but they don't have the hardware now. So what they can do is they come to us. We get them the best type of financing possible, and the hardware extremely quickly, so that rather than having to spend, let's say, $150 million or what to get 30 racks of NVL72s, they can finance that, right, against the contracts they already have. Because what they have is people with money waiting to use hardware that they don't have yet. Right. So those are win-win situations, and usually we can get those types of deals closed very quickly. And it's a win-win for everyone. So that's one aspect of it. And then the other side is kind of being able to utilize the cash on hand for other more important things from a business. But at the end of the day, with the way the pricing and availability of hardware has been going, financing has been a booming industry.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. I was going to ask you how you de-risk that. So it's not like applying for a 0% credit card offers. There's actually a business plan and assets that are in place. Okay, no, that's very good. So in
Yeah, and
terms of
actually, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. There's also other ways that people and the banks, investors, de-risk themselves, is as opposed to just having a straight up loan. Sometimes there's rev share models. So when you come as a NeoCloud, for example, again, I take those because those are the easier ones to kind of discuss here. You'll say, hey, I'm going to be renting my GPUs out for X number of dollars per hour, and hey, I'll pay you this. I pay off the debt at this interest rate, and either to a certain point in time until a portion of that loan is recovered, or for whatever amount of time, I'll share my revenue with you, 10%, 6%, 2%, whatever. Right. So that kind of de-risks things as well, because the investor will know that they can, recoup majority or some part of their investment. Another thing that we do is a lot of times we work with, this plays again with the NeoClouds. The smaller ones, we will take a lot of industry data, crunch it, and figure out based on what the current market pricing is and previous market movements and all sorts of other variables, build a model for them, a financial model, to see, hey, spending X millions of dollars, is that going to give you an IRR? And if that's so, what percentage, right? How much gain are you going to get out of it? So is it worth it or not? We do that a lot. A lot of financiers are doing that as well. So that's another way that the bank de-risks themselves, but the end customer can also make a decision. Hey, maybe I'll scale back and use a different kind of solution, or, oh, perfect. Look, we have a 20% IRR. So let's go for it.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of democratization, AI is a great democratizer, but what do you see as a key challenge and opportunities making AI accessible to founders and businesses from a variety of industries and experience backgrounds? How can we bridge the gap?
I think at this point, to make AI available to the masses, and when I say democratizing and bringing it to the masses, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. That's as a producer of tools, not as a consumer. Because for us end users, there's chat GPTs of the world and blah, blah, blah. So, if a company puts out a tool that solves my problem, I'll use it. It's free for me, right? Or I'll have to pay for it to improve business. That's a different discussion. But if you think about it in terms of democratizing AI and making it available to everyone to use to build solutions for themselves, I think the biggest thing is availability and pricing. Right now is very scarce and very expensive. And there's been over the past 2, 3 years, 4 years, I know a lot of companies have been started up, or existing companies have invested lots of money in growing or building their business as it comes to specific hardware that accelerates AI workloads. In other words, GPU replacement, right? That market is definitely going to change how much it costs and what type of a footprint people need to deploy these types of solutions. So companies that currently wouldn't be able to spend, $5 million, $10 million to buy hardware to get their idea into completion, they'll be able to do that with maybe a fraction of that cost, because you now have availability. There's more vendors out there. There's more solutions that you can use. So you're no longer stuck thinking, hey, this is too expensive of a project to get into.
We don't have to get in the weeds on this, but I've had this on previous conversations too. I've asked a question: when you look at the current foundational models, the way they do embedding, the decoding, etc., the um, the tokenomics, right? So if you have, you know, n tokens, right, and it's doing n squared comparison. So if you have a million tokens, that's a million squared, and then if you go to 2 million, that's 2 million squared. Then you have a quadratic scaling in terms of the cost, right? So do you think something will have to fundamentally change from an architecture perspective to make AI more sustainable? And we didn't even talk about all the energy costs around that, and the compute and the memory and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at it. Traditionally, there's two ways you solve a technical problem. One, the easy one, is throw more hardware at it and just forget it, right? In our case with AI, that becomes prohibitively expensive, as you just mentioned, and it doesn't scale, because once something, you have a project that starts to pick up, it usually keeps on picking up for a while. It's not a small spike. So that's not the right way to do it. There's definitely a lot of smart entities, companies, research institutes out there that are coming up with new ways to implement algorithms, and even new algorithms to improve building models from a mathematical perspective, right? Trimming existing ones, or just looking at what they're doing and just making it more efficient in simple terms. There's consultancies out there that do that. They take models and make them more efficient. And I told
Like
you,
controlling, like the context windows and how much you're actually putting in, retyping in prompts, and there's simple little things that can be done, right? But there's also some big things that need to be done, right?
exactly. I mean, well, that's yeah. There's all sorts of ways to skin this cat. The best thing that you can do is to make sure that your code is as mathematically lean as possible. So if you're thinking about neural networks, right? There's layers upon layers upon layers in these models, right? And so sometimes they're developed in an inefficient way for whatever reason, and you can always improve that, right? So when I say performance improvement, I'm actually talking about mathematically looking at what the model is doing, and eliminating unnecessary steps or improving steps that maybe aren't optimized currently. So it's an optimization thing. And then beyond that, models may run differently on different types of hardware. So I mentioned custom proprietary hardware. The majority of these solutions that I'm aware of, they usually take these existing models that were either designed for NVIDIA or AMD for that matter, and they recompile them into their own engine into something that their hardware understands, and usually it's very low key. The end customer doesn't have to do anything about it, but that technology already exists, and a lot of them in that process they end up optimizing the model anyway. It's not necessarily quantization of the existing model, but they basically ensure that the thing fits in memory, and their memory speeds are usually super high, and so with very minimal lifting, they can improve existing model performance. But that, coupled with looking at your model mathematically and looking at ways to optimize different parts and pieces of it, that definitely is the way to go. And there is a ton of research, a lot of papers, a lot of people out there publishing ways that people can use to do that. But usually that's in frontier models, fine tuning and those types of things. Usually you're working with a model that's fairly strong and good, and in some cases maybe not. Right? The open weight models are slightly different, so it's always good to have your bring in an expert that can take a look at your workload and your models and figure out if there's ways to optimize them.
I appreciate that. In March, I'm actually moderating a panel talking about the current LLMs and foundational models. Are they going to be sustainable and meaningful as we go toward AGI? So that shifts us into ethical AI, right? Always try and make sure that we're talking about how do we balance innovation with responsible development, so ethical and responsible AI, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm pretty happy with, I should say, with the state of technology as it sits for as AI is concerned. I'm happy we have these types of tools. I can think of an idea and have an app ready in less than an hour that would have taken me years previously to get it working. Right. I can think of a problem that I get an answer for in detail within a few minutes, just asking a one of these GPTs that are out there. So it's helping our life, but at the same time, the ethical part is things in society have to have rules and boundaries, just like there are no legal books. I guess I've never looked for it, but I would assume if somebody wanted to do build something that's illegal to build, you can't walk into a bookstore and say, hey, where's a book on making X or Y? Yeah, no, believe me, I know. So there has to be guardrails that are put in place because bad actors are just humans. Just they've been doing things they shouldn't be doing, and now they can get the answer on how to do that a lot quicker. Just like you and me figure out the answer to our situation. So yeah, I think guardrails need to be in place. I think there needs to be an overarching global entity that basically has a representative from everywhere else in the world to ensure that this knowledge that goes into it and that technology is protected, right? But at the end of the day, running models locally, anyone can take any open weight model, feed it any kind of existing data that they can get their hands on, and with a little bit of tweaking and hacking, get it to give them an answer.
Yeah, and I was pretty happy with most of these models, but recently I've been I'll put in I'm trying to optimize my podcast, so I'll put in my transcripts, and I create trailers and ask for actual lines for my trailer. I'll put in metrics. So I've done this on my custom GPT and Chat GPT. I've used Perplexity. I've used Gemini 3. I've even used Claude. And I'll ask it questions about, and I'll copy and paste stuff in metrics, and they'll produce something. I go, was that an actual line? And he goes, no, it wasn't. Whatever. I said, so you lied. And he goes, yes, I lied. And all these recently, I would put screenshots and it would make up metrics or look at a previous cache information or for your recent episode, these are the metrics and blah, blah, blah. And this is across the board now. I'm seeing something's happening. And I'm concerned because there's companies out there that are asking these GPTs to analyze their company data, their sales. And I got to do the research. I heard one company, they used it and it made all these recommendations that were based on garbage data, garbage in, garbage out. So I know a lot of people are not really kicking the tires to make sure that what the AI is producing is actually based on the real data that's provided. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I've been experiencing that in the last couple of weeks.
The thing I do is I will probably never give up using AI tools just because of the performance improvement that it's brought me in my daily work. I haven't built a presentation from scratch. I can't even remember for how long, right? Just as an example. But what I always do is usually I kind of have an answer in my head for the question that
Yeah,
I'm
I do
trying.
too, and I wanted to validate it.
Yeah,
And
and
then it makes up an answer, which is, and the thing is, I'll
exactly.
always use it, but the reason we're using it is to save us time and not have to ask it 3 times to tell me the truth, you know?
But what I do, and I think some of the people that I talk to, they also are doing this in the industry, is you can build layers, right? And with agentic AI, it's actually fairly easy to set this up. And so, but personally, me, like if I'm using a GPT for whatever reason, I take that output and I dump it into another one, and I ask them, "Hey, do you see any flaws here given this information?" And so I have to double check each other, right? So you can build agentic AI on top of your current
Yeah, like
workflows.
AI judges on top. You know,
Yeah,
I'll actually do. I'll actually put in different. To assess the answers, and they'll say this one's right or this one's right. Oh, that's good. You know, yeah, no, that's cool. No, I appreciate that. So, you know, we're coming up on time. So, any concluding thoughts, insights, encouragement to those that are seeking to get in this space or struggling to build their business?
yeah, I would say I see a lot of growth in this in AI. Period. If you're investing in the stock market, invest in AI. If you're trying to build an AI business, go for it. There's ways to be successful. If you have a business and you're thinking about implementing AI or not, and you're waiting to see how mature the technology becomes, don't wait. It's too late already. Start. But more importantly, always identify what it is you're trying to do, what situation, what problem or challenge you're trying to fix. Come up with that solution. And sometimes AI is not even the answer, right? It's either too expensive or too complicated. There may be other solutions that are available that you can use, or somebody might have beaten you to the punch and there is a solution out there using AI that you can use. So that's super important. But yeah, absolutely. I think AI is not a fad. It's not going to go away. There is not a bubble that's associated with AI itself. There is bubble associated with the underlying infrastructure, the data center, the energy, the hardware. That will change over time. But the usage of artificial intelligence, I think, is only going to grow and grow and grow. Just looking at how fast it's improving, I can't even imagine the abilities that AI will have, whether it's AGI or close to it or not at all. Just if it continues going that same curve linearly, even, it's just going to be crazy in the next by the end of this year. So yeah, 100%. I would encourage everyone to understand what you're doing. But yeah, if you're trying to build a business, increase your business or improve your business through AI, 100% do it if you know how. If not, always reach out. Vertical Data, we're available. We can provide consulting end to end from a entire stack perspective. We can provide software engineering consulting, business consulting, looking at what you're trying to do and basically talk to you about various ways of implementing those solutions, all the way up the stack to hardware financing and so on, and data centers. So yeah, always make sure you reduce your supply chain reliance. The best thing to do is to have as little moving parts as possible. So that's it. Yeah. Other than that, just again, thanks for having me here and giving me the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, no, Hamid, I think we could talk all day about the future of the AI space. We're coming up on time. Once again, where's the best place for folks to learn more about your connectivity? LinkedIn, your webpage, right?
Yeah, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, connect with me. You're gonna post my info, I think, Sanjay, and then verticaldata.io. reach out to us through there, and we'll be more than happy to sit down and chat with you.
Yeah, and also, folks, Vertical Data, we're also adding a CTA, a link to connect with them too in the comments in the description. So please make sure to do that. So awesome. Everyone make sure to check out and connect with Hamid. Also, connect with the Vertical Data, especially for your needs. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple. Hamid, once again, I learned quite a bit from this episode. I'm going to apply into my business and into my podcast going forward. Thanks for sharing your insights today. I'm Sanjay Kalluvilayil, creator, host, and founder and CEO of Stonehouse Advisors. I'm the creator and host for this show. I hope you can gain a wealth of game-changing real-world insights to grow, transform, and scale to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. See you all next time. Thanks, everybody.